Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of our ServiceNow webinar live stream. In this week's episode, we're going to get started with incident management. And I suspect that we're probably going to spend at least 2 weeks, possibly 3, covering all of incident management. There's a lot to cover, and I want to make sure that everything is addressed that can possibly come up, both from tickets that we've received, training feedback, as well as our own personal experiences. Unfortunately, this week I am flying solo, and I also apologize for the late start. It is the annual Thank Goodness for Staff here at UC Davis, so that's why we're starting about 20 minutes late this week. But thank you for tuning in for those of you that are viewing our live stream, which brings up our next topic, how to access the YouTube live stream. We still have our email address, and while we have not set up Zoom, the goal is to offer that as well. Today's agenda, as we talked about, is going to be incident management, and we're going to focus primarily on the top half of the field with form fields such as caller, categorization, configuration items, assignment groups, in state and impact and urgency. And then next week we will continue along with working sort of on the second half of the incident form field. So I hope that you can join us next week as well. So let's kind of dive right into it. In an interest of time, I want to make sure that we get everything covered. And that's not where we need to be. We need to be here. So what is incident management? On the left-hand side, it's going to be under incident, and you're going to click Create New, which will take us to this screen. Currently, how we use incident management here at the help desk is anything that is considered a work stoppage or impact to productivity. And that somewhat aligns with the ITIL definition of incident management, and we somewhat sort of bake request fulfillment into it as the request module is still being developed. We're hoping to have that out in the middle of 2017, and we will have a full-featured incident and request management system. For the purposes of our discussion here today, though, we'll get right into it. Here's our unique serial number or ticket number, and you can see here that this field is grayed out, which indicates it's read-only. The red star indicates that it is a mandatory field. And we'll start by putting in my name. What's great about this is it will also resolve against a Kerberos login ID and a UC Davis email address if you have bits of information, but maybe not who they are. And you'll immediately get some information by me, their primary support group, and their department. Before we move on to the next field, though, I would like us to just take a quick second to look at these two fields that I think sometimes get overlooked. The first is going to be the user profile page, which you can see a little bit more information about them. And this one in particularly, the show-related incidents. This is incredibly handy for finding out situations where this individual may have submitted a ticket earlier about a different topic or a similar topic. Hey, I spoke with so-and-so last week, and I'm still having the issue. Oh, do you remember your ticket number? Well, no, I don't. Oh, okay. Well, was it this one, perhaps? It was, and I could click that and then go into that ticket. It's very helpful, and I think sometimes it gets overlooked because this icon may not jump out at you. The requested for field is going to be a situation where perhaps Jason here is calling on behalf of Karen DeMora. And what that's going to allow is a situation where notifications are sent to both Jason and Karen. And that can be helpful based on what the customer prefers. The category and subcategory fields are going to be dynamic based on what you select. By default, you have the 3 categories: request, service disruption, and general inquiry. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on defining what those are. We will plan to do that, though, in a future webinar discussion. For the purposes of this discussion, let's say it is a request, and then you have subcategories that are available, and say it's a how-to. Had I selected something else here, like a service disruption, you'll see that my choices change, and I could select perhaps performance degradation. To make it nice and easy, we'll just do general inquiry, which does not require a subcategory. The configuration item list can sometimes trip people up. There are a lot of them. Jason, how many are there, you might ask? That's a great question. There are 403 configuration items. And I'm pretty sure all of you using your 800 megahertz radios, and I know you know who you are, or your 3.5 VGA audio, probably don't get a lot of tickets about those things. It's possible though. Think of the configuration item as the thing, the object, the program, whatever it is that is causing this incident to be logged. For example, perhaps my customer has called about they need some assistance with Office 365, or maybe they had a question about Canvas. Now, I've put an asterisk in front of everything, and that's just something that I prefer to do because I get a wild card. For example, earlier I said it's a ticket about 365, and you notice that this time that configuration item did not come up. And the reason for that is the way that ServiceNow works is it reads left to right. And in this case, the Office 365 CI is under Uconnect Office 365. So I would have to type in Uconnect, case is not sensitive, space Office 365. That star 365, though, will search anywhere in the configuration item for the sequential lettering, alphanumeric positioning, crazy word, of Uconnect Office 365. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'll just show it real quick. These are fields, however, that could be leveraged with problem management or change management to show, well, if Office 365 is degraded, are there children associated with that? Or is Office 365, in fact, a child of something else? If CAS is down, the Office 365 web portal probably isn't going to work because it uses CAS, for example. That's helpful for service desk users because, well, Banner is unavailable, which means there's a lot of downstream services that may be impacted by that. The assignment group is going to be the group that you're in working on this ticket. And I understand that some of you are probably in different groups. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to use a group that I am in, IET Inbox. Upon selecting that, I'm going to be presented with people who are in that group. For example, I know that I'll use a random person, a colleague of mine, Brian Donnelly. Now, I know Brian is not in IET Inbox, and it would probably be helpful if I spelled his name right. Brian, I apologize, I'm massacring your last name. Doesn't matter here, though, and I apologize for that, because Brian is not in this group and it won't validate. Whereas I know that I am in this group and it will validate. Now, why is that important? The reason for that is, in the case of my account, I'm in 4 different groups, and maybe I want to wear the IET Inbox hat, or maybe I don't. The other thing that's important to consider here is what is the assignment group? If you assign a ticket to the wrong group, or you create a ticket in the wrong group's sort of queue, shall we call it, it's very possible that they won't know what to do with the ticket. So just keep that in mind. Always double check to make sure that you're using the correct assignment group and then assign to the appropriate person. This state by default is new, and it would then move to work in progress upon saving the ticket. Awaiting user info and awaiting third party can be used to indicate that while it is an active ticket, it is currently not being worked on. Maybe you're waiting on information from the customer, awaiting user info. Maybe you're awaiting a part from a vendor, or you're awaiting feedback from another third party in this case, and you would do awaiting third party. We'll set it to work in progress rather than waiting for it to roll over. Here are two more read-only fields. This indicates the exact timestamp in which the ticket was created and who opened it. In this case, it was me. And the reason why that's important is there's nothing stopping me from, when I make this ticket, to immediately assign it to someone else when I save it for the first time. I can do that. That may make sense in a particular workflow. But this is sort of that paper trail of, when Kevin were to receive this ticket, why did I get this ticket? Hopefully there'll be something in the work notes, and we'll talk about work notes next week. But he would be able to see that I opened the ticket, not that it was some phantom ticket that was created on his behalf. Building and room allow you to tag the location of perhaps either the affected device, the impacted team or individual. And this is helpful if you need to dispatch a desktop support person or some on-site presence needed to address the issue, or maybe where the user and its device is located. This uses the facilities database, so be careful with some of these names if you decide to use this. As the Animal Resource Service J3, you might know that as the hog barn. It's not actually the hog barn, but in the facilities database, it's referred to as that. Same with the room number. Sometimes the room numbers, as you can see here, there's no context. There's also 67,000 to pick from. That wildcard key might be helpful to get you close. The contact type by default is phone. This one sort of makes me smile when I think about it, because occasionally we will get tickets into the help desk where I know someone manually created it because the default contact type is still set as phone, even though they didn't call into the help desk. They forgot to change this. Now, that's maybe not a terrible thing. It's not even critical. What is important, though, is if you decide to run reports on how many phone calls did the help desk receive about this particular issue, or for the month of May. Well, that could potentially skew your numbers, because in this case, it would be recorded as a phone call, and it would not align with how many calls the help desk received on May 24th. I will let you decide the appropriate contact type when you're making tickets. Know that if you send an email that's routed into a queue, it defaults to email. And if you create a ticket via the Service Hub, it defaults to Service Hub. I like to think of these as walk-in tickets when I create a ticket and sort of hand it off to someone. Other units might see that as self-service. What's important, though, is consistency. I've said that when I used to do ServiceNow training, and I tell that to anyone when they ask me about best practices for using the tool. You always want to be consistent in however you record a ticket, whether it's a category, subcategory, a configuration item, an impact and urgency. If this particular type of ticket is always a 3-3, then it should always be a 3-3. Otherwise, it will break your report. The time worked field, as you can see, is currently ticking up, and this indicates that I've had the ticket open for about 16 minutes. I can stop it. I can manually add time. I cannot easily subtract time. The reason that you might want to use this field is if you bill for your time or services, or you use some sort of time reporting system where it's important to record just exactly how many minutes you spent on a particular project. The impact and urgency. The impact and urgency, I won't spend a lot of time on that because it's a little bit of a rabbit hole. But I will show you this PDF that is available via a knowledge base article that I'll also reference in a moment. I encourage you to review this. I encourage you to read it over and make sure that you fully understand it. The reason for this is, as someone who looks over a lot of tickets in their group, and my group is responsible for sending tickets to other groups, I know that these fields are not used correctly some, if not most of the time. I see a lot of 335 tickets, and occasionally we'll stumble across tickets where people just set 1 to everything because they believe their issue is absolutely critical. A single user has a problem with a thing. That is never a 1-1. Now, if that single user person happens to be Interim Chancellor Hexter, well, we can probably have a different conversation about that. I have yet to see a ticket from him related to anything. But just keep that in mind, and if you're curious where that wonderful PDF is located, it is part of the knowledge base article 1193. There's a lot of great resources here that the IT service management team has put together, and I encourage you to read them. I encourage you to review them. One thing that I would like to show is the priority field is a byproduct of impact and urgency. You do not set it. If you set a high here and this goes to critical, in the list view of the incident, the ticket will be highlighted in red. If I set this to high, medium, and this is high, or I set this to medium and set this to high, it will be in orange. And that helps to give a visual indicator for your staff so that they can prioritize those tickets. One thing that I would like to show is the VIP field. And unfortunately, I did not think of off the top of my head who might be a VIP in the ticket. So I'm going to start excellent. Good first guess. Always go with your boss's boss. In this case, my boss's boss, Morna, is considered a VIP within the IET support system. Her name is highlighted in red, and you see a VIP flag. One last thing that I'll show you before we close out this video is what happens if you get a ticket where the person is unknown. They are not a UC Davis affiliate. We have that problem at the help desk all the time. We have something called guest. What guest will allow you to do is still fill in the required field and save the ticket. From here, you can put in a guest name, and you could put anything you want. I'll go with my trusty old reliable Mr. Leroy Jenkins. Leroy calls into the help desk a lot. He always has problems. Now in this case though, if I were to search in the caller field for Leroy Jenkins, I would not get any returns. Please be careful with the caller field. It's a slippery slope to just put guest because you forgot to ask their name or you only got their first name. It makes it very difficult to sometimes find their older tickets. You also lose the ability to show related incidents because now the related incidents are going to be linked off of guest. And I guarantee you that you will not be able to quickly find all of Leroy Jenkins' tickets while using that triangle versus if Leroy was in the caller field. Oh, and one last thing, configuration item, as I know this can be confusing. If you are ever truly stuck, you have hit the end of the road and you have no idea what to do or where to go, you can always use the Z CIs. These were the original categories that were created when various units from College of Engineering began to use ServiceNow back in 2013. We made it very easy to type in and find by hitting Z and ZNOS at the bottom, which just so happens to start with the letter Z. Any one of these CIs will work for just about any call or ticket you get because they're so generic. The issue with that, though, is because they are so generic, you don't get that granular data that you may want to record for future topics. If I were to select email and collaboration, I would then need to go through every single ticket to figure out, well, which one was related to Outlook versus Office 365 versus Davis Mail. Takeaway points, and we'll finish up here. Be consistent. Use appropriate categorization and configuration items whenever you can. Ensure the appropriate impact, urgency, and priority are used. And ultimately, be thorough. Take the extra time to make sure that the incident record is filled out correctly the first time. Your customer will appreciate it. Your coworkers will appreciate it. And whoever runs reports, they'll really appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in this week. Kevin will be back next week where we'll continue to talk more about incidents. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and an extended weekend for Memorial Day.